As a note, we will meet again tomorrow with a very brief agenda, and then Wednesday we will not meet, and then Thursday we'll plan on working. No, we won't. Yes, we will. So Thursday we're working some of those bills, and then we'll have a informational hearing. So as we get underway, you were sent the minutes on March 1st for the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, the 21st of February's minutes. I'll accept the motion to approve by Smith, seconded by Mosier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes approved. We will now open up the hearing on Senate Bill 364. And with that, we'll call on Kyle Hamilton to give us a briefing on this bill. What's that? 346, the milk bill, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Currently, certain milk and milk product standards are established in the definition section of the Kansas Dairy Products Law, which can be found in Section 3 of this bill. Section 1 of the bill would establish a standalone standard section that could be used to determine what constitutes milk, goat milk, milk for manufacturing purposes, and grade A pasteurized milk. And then there are corresponding amendments that would be made to the definitions of all those terms in Section 3. Concerning on-farm retail sale of milk or milk products, current law defines on-farm retail of sale of milk or milk products to mean milk or milk products sold to the consumer by a producer on the producer's farm from the production of the producer's dairy herd, so long as the person making the sale does not promote the sale of milk or milk products in any manner other than by a sign on the dairy farm. In 2019, the Shawnee County District Court determined that this limitation violated the First and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, along with the Kansas Constitution Bill of Rights, Section 11. New Section 2 of the bill, which is on page 1, line 34, would allow the retail sale of milk and milk products if the containers of such milk or milk products bear a label with a visible statement that says raw milk or unpasteurized. Section 2 would also allow any person who engages in the on-farm sale, retail sale of milk or milk products to advertise such products, so long as the advertisement is not false or misleading and states that the products are raw and unpasteurized. Violations of this section could result in a civil penalty. Section 3, again, that's the definition section. The bill would just update the definitions in the Kansas Dairy Products Law. Again, the definition of on-farm retail sale of milk or milk products would be amended by striking the unconstitutional limitation on the promotion of such products, and that's on page 6 of the bill on line 9. No definitions would be added here, and most of the stricken language is addressed in other sections of the bill, including standards for milk, goat milk, milk products, and grade A pasteurized milk. That's part of the new Section 1. Additionally, this section would strike the definition of imminent health hazard on page 3, line 34, but it would reinsert the second and third sentences of that definition later on within Section 6 of the bill. That's page 10, line 42. We'll get there in just a minute. Section 3 also includes technical cleanup of terminology and grammar. And then sections 4 and 5 would extend the current sunset date on various milk and dairy fees from 2023 to 2028, including license fees for any person who engages in business at any of the following: dairy manufacturing plants, milk distributor, milk hauler, operator of a milk or cream transfer station, and manufacturer of single-service dairy containers. And then also extend the sunsets for certain milk and inspection regulatory services. Additionally, on page 8 line 19, the Senate committee decreased the sunset fee for delivering raw milk to milk processors for pasteurization from 1 cent to 3/4 of a cent per 100 pounds. So that decrease is what would be in effect if the fee were to sunset. Declaration of imminent health hazard. So going back to section 6, the definition section, again, it strikes that definition of imminent health hazard, and then the second and third sentences that were in that definition are being reinserted in section 6, along with some additional new language. And so as of now, it would state, when necessary to protect the public health, an imminent health hazard may be declared by the Secretary at any point in a chain of events that ultimately may result in harm or danger to the public health. The occurrence of the final anticipated injury or other disease-related condition shall not be a prerequisite for the establishment of the existence of an imminent health hazard. And then the new additional language would immediately follow that, and it would state, and the use of any authority granted pursuant to this act, including any action taken pursuant to subsection A or B of or KSA 65780A or 65785 and amendments thereto. And just for your reference, KSA 65780A concerns the temporary suspension of licenses and permits, and KSA 65785 concerns stop sale and stop use orders. Senate Bill 346, as amended by the Senate Committee, would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be able to take any preliminary questions.
Questions for Kyle? Quite a lot, isn't it, for a simple bill? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The secretary who can declare a health emergency, that's the Secretary of
Agriculture.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kyle, on page 6, I believe that's the definition page. Where is it stated that, what is the definition of milk that gets everything at once? It's a joke, it's spoiled milk.
I'm laughing on the inside.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know that.
That was utterly ridiculous.
It's not quite up to the caliber of our egg jokes from that bill, I feel like.
Representative Jacobs, I don't think you were close enough to the mic for your comments, so let's get that out there so we all hear it.
Oh. Well, not for the record.
Yes. All right. Other questions? Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kyle, in your brief, I have noted of late that maybe I should know a little bit more about what these other statutes are, that when you cite a statute, and every bill has it, and I've never asked this question before, and I'm not picking on you, but can you kind of tell me how these relate to the bill, where you say at the end of the bill, those statutes that you cite, can you tell me what they're about or how they relate to the bill? Not necessarily word for word, but can you give me a general idea of what those statutes are and why they're cited in this bill?
So again, KSA 65780A, that generally speaking is concerning the temporary suspension of licenses and permits underneath this Dairy Product Act. And then KSA 65785 concerns stop sale and stop use orders. And so that's being added on to the language concerning the imminent health hazards, saying that the occurrence of the final anticipated injury or other disease-related condition shall not be a prerequisite for the establishment of the existence of an imminent health hazard and the use of any authority granted pursuant to this act, including any action taken pursuant to the statutes that I just referenced. So they fall underneath the umbrella of any authority granted pursuant to this act. But I might defer to the department to kind of go into more detail about some of those changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that. I just think it's important that we kind of know what those are, and I sometimes get them looked up and sometimes I don't. So the 65,785, did you say that stops sale because of the health hazard? So it's.
Correct.
Okay. So there's these other statutes that we affect when we do these bills, and I just wanted to bring that point out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is serious. Right on the beginning on page 14, it talks about goat milk sold in retail packages shall contain not less than 2.5% milk and not less than 7.5% milk solids, not fat. How are we going to regulate that, or how's that measured?
That's a question that I would have to defer to the department.
Okay, thank
What
you.
was the page number for that again?
First page.
Oh, first page,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Other questions? All right, thanks. Be available if we have some more, but we will go on to testimony. Fiscal note, there is a fiscal note you might see and will not create changes and not have a fiscal effect. So we'll go now to proponents. First up, Kenny Titus, the Chief Counsel, or Kenneth, I guess, formal. Only time I'm called Kenneth is by my mom and my sister, so I don't know if you're in trouble or not, but from the Department of Agriculture. Welcome to committee again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kenny Titus, Chief Counsel for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I'm here today to speak in favor of Senate Bill 346, and as the reviser explained, the way I look at this, we've kind of got three different sets of changes here to the dairy law we're trying to deal with. The primary issue was the labeling and advertising of raw milk. If you were around in 2020, I believe, there was an attempt to change this, and COVID stopped that from getting to fruition, and so we still have an unconstitutional statute on the books. The original law said you could sell raw milk and raw milk products on your farm, but you couldn't advertise it. That was a violation of free speech. So if nothing else, that was sort of the impetus to look at the dairy law, because we need to clean up the unconstitutional part of the statute. What we've come up with is a relatively straightforward way, we think, to do that. If you're going to sell raw milk from your farm, which that's still the one limit on it, is it has to be an on-farm sale. You have to label that product as either raw or unpasteurized. And if you're going to advertise it, you have to include the fact that it's raw or unpasteurized in the advertisement. It can't be false or misleading. And then in order to make sure there's an efficient way to make sure there aren't malicious advertisements or misinformation out there, we are asking for an extension of civil penalty authority for someone that would do a false or misleading advertisement. So those were all in the summaries that Kyle presented on raw milk. On the sort of general restructuring of the bill, if you'll look through that definition section, and some of this comes from the way the feds write their statutes, but you'll notice that there would be a definition and then there would be explicit regulatory language as well. So if you look up the original raw milk definition, it would tell you what that was, and then it would have the prohibition on advertising and other regulatory pieces. So we thought if we're going to clean this up, we don't like having to cite the definition to also be the regulation. So most of the strike-throughs in the definition, we pulled them out. We put them, most of it went into one of the new sections we've added, so we didn't change any of that. Kyle mentioned the imminent health hazard. We pulled that out because that was a defined term that was never actually used anywhere in the dairy law. And so we moved it into that section that deals with emergency orders and stop sales, because it puts some rails on it, right? It now has context of if you need to stop production at a dairy facility to protect the public health, you're subject to the emergency provisions of the Kansas Emergency Procedure Act, or excuse me, the Administrative Procedure Act, and all the other safeguards and rules that are there to follow. So we think it's clearer how that would impact both for the steps we should take and for the folks that are subject to it. With that particular term, if you watch the Senate debate, it did raise some questions. I would point out that really only comes up for grade A licensed dairies. This has nothing to do with raw milk producers. So you're used to regular inspections and held to a grade A standard if the imminent health hazard is going to come into place. So I didn't want to confuse the two. And then after the general reorg, we touch on some of the fee sections as well. So this committee and body passed a fee bill several months ago that dealt with pesticide and fertilizer in the Division of Water Resources. Dairy is in that same group of fees that sunset in the near future. We thought since we were doing a specific dairy bill, we'd go ahead and include the extension of those fees in this bill instead of the broader fee bill. As with those fees, they've been the same since 2010, and we're just asking for a 5-year extension. The one change is in the language I highlighted in my testimony, and this regards inspection fees for certain products. When the dairy bill was originally set up as it stands now, there was an inspection fee if you used grade A milk to create a grade A product, if you use grade B milk to create a grade B product, and so on. Well, grade B milk is a milk for manufacturing purposes, so we'd use that to make cheese or some other product. But the way the milk industry has evolved since this was written, there are no grade B manufacturers in Kansas anymore. So everyone uses, for the most part, grade A milk to make whatever product they're making. And the way the statutes were written, there's a loophole. If you were to bring grade A milk from out of state into Kansas and make an ungraded product, it doesn't actually fall under any of our inspection fee regimes because they were so rigidly set up with those parallel categories. So with the new cheese plant anticipated in Southwest Kansas, they have a number of out-of-state dairies. We did visit with them before we introduced this bill, and they had no problems with it at the time. And so what we're doing is we added the phrase "or other dairy products" to make sure all milk it's all going to be inspected, but that we can collect the fee for the inspection. And the positive side of this is that once it's in place, if that facility meets its anticipated goals, we anticipate we'll be able to lower the fees for all dairy producers in the state. So we think long-term this will leave us in pretty good shape. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Representative Seibert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might be kind of a redundant question, but does this pertain to Amish dairies too that sell on-the-farm milk, or?
They would be in the raw milk category, that's right, yeah.
They would have to have the permits and things now?
So there is no permitting of raw milk sales. The only requirement is you have to label it.
I wasn't sure if that would be included in the raw milk if they sell it for human consumption.
Yeah, it would be, but there's no licensing or anything like that. We're not inspecting or licensing any raw milk sellers.
Would that go for farmers markets then too?
So you have to sell it on your premise.
You have to, okay, that's good answer. Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Representative Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kenny, could you answer that question that I had with Kyle on the first part of this page?
So those are the federal standards of identity for that. In order to be called milk, you have to meet certain milk fat solid standards. There's just a separate definition for goat's milk because the milk has less milk fat solids. It would be tested if you were a grade A, selling grade A goat's milk, but I would have to ask our program manager if there are any grade A goat dairies in the state.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Up next, John Donnelly with Kansas Farm Bureau. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am John Donnelly here today on behalf of Kansas Farm Bureau, and I first need to start out with what many of you will view as an excuse, but it's actually a reality. I was busy on Friday when this testimony was put together, and I told someone to just use the testimony from the Senate and didn't realize I had referenced technical amendments that needed to be done on this bill and the next one, so I apologize for that. So don't read what I put on paper, but listen to what I say. And that's my fault. So like I said, not an excuse, just a reality, but you can view it as you will. I'm here today basically on Senate Bill 346. I want to stand up in support of the bill. Number one, I think this is a good example of responsible agency governance. In years past, when we've had fee extensions in different departments, but including the Department of Ag, it seems like there's always also an increase in the fees, and they did not do that. In fact, I think they're running this program in a very efficient manner, and we may see some decreases in the future even, and this gives them the ability to do that, or helps them maintain the ability to do that. So I wanted to say that, and I think all of the changes that are made in this bill do make some sense, and they've done a great job of working with all the constituents. So I do not stand up and compliment agencies very often, so I thought it was appropriate to do that, and Kansas Farm Bureau is fully supportive of this bill. So thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Questions, Mr. Donnelly? Seeing none, thank you. And up next is Tom Bruno from the Kansas Dairy Association. Welcome to committee.
Chairman, I don't know how I can follow John Donnelly. After those statements, I just want to introduce myself, Tom Bruno. I'm here representing the Kansas Dairy Association. You should have the association statement in your packet. We are in support of this bill. We fully support what the department is proposing on the fee extensions and those other adjustments. I do want to point out one area where my board is still of some concern within the current language of the bill. As the bill was originally drafted and introduced in the Senate, the label and advertising were required to contain, to state that this product contains raw milk or that is not pasteurized and could contain bacteria that may cause foodborne illness. We still support the inclusion of language similar, that language or similar, that the product may contain bacteria that could cause foodborne illness. So we would hope that the committee would consider those minor changes and move the bill out favorably. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Bruno? Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that this bill disallows the on-farm sale of raw milk, that it's not allowing it to be sold in stores. It's just the on-farm sale. So this would just be the sale for anybody that goes to a farm to buy raw milk. So it seems to me like they know exactly what they're buying, and it's required to be labeled as raw milk. And so I'm just wondering why you believe that it's necessary to have that warning label on there.
So if we go back 2 years, 2 years ago, my board voted and requested that a bill be brought in response to this legal issue to prohibit the sale of raw milk. We have advanced since then. We've adjusted a little bit. We believe because of the advertising advancements, moving it from on-farm advertising only to advertising period, that it is very important because you're reaching a much wider audience, that we make sure and that we ensure that those people that may not understand that there is a significant difference between pasteurization and unpasteurized milk, that those folks are fully informed before they have the unfortunate possible incident with it.
All right, other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And also we have Samuel McRoberts from Kansas Justice Institute. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. I am Sam McRoberts from Kansas Justice Institute, and we are in favor of SB 346 as amended. But what I would like to do is just take a minute to kind of explain how we got here. And everyone has kind of alluded to it, but I'd like to drill down in a little bit more detail. So in 2019, Kansas Justice Institute represented Mark and Coraline Bunner near Pfeiffer, Kansas. And Mark and Coraline run a little raw milk dairy. They've got about 10 goats. And the whole time that they were trying to sell their goat milk, they could not talk about their product away from their farm. So every day they got up at 5:30 in the morning, they milked their goats, they would work all day with their goats, and then at night they would milk their goats again. And it was so stifling that they couldn't even go talk about their product, their living, the thing that they made money off of, away from their farm. And as I started talking to people around the state, it was really sad because these people could not say, hey, yeah, I have raw milk. Come back to my farm. Take a look at what we do. Our goats are clean. Our milk is clean. We'd love to have you have a sample. They couldn't even do that. And so for about 50 or 60 years, this statute was on the books that stifled people's speech. It kept them from actually talking about their living. We sued, and the Shawnee County District Court agreed that the statute was unconstitutional. And so that happened in 2019. And I think it's really important to note that Mr. Titus represents the agency. And Mr. Titus is essentially the person or the attorney for the agency that we sued. And today, 2 or 3 years later, Mr. Titus agrees with us that this is an appropriate bill when it comes to advertising and labeling. That's significant. It's significant that the agency we sued agrees with us that this is appropriate, and there's no need to add additional language to any labeling or any advertisement. And so I think it's an unfair characterization to say that this change to a label is a minor change. Because again, while Mark and Coraline were selling their product, they were required to write on the bottle raw. And nobody was confused about what raw meant. If you are traveling to a farm to buy raw milk, you know what that means. It means it's not pasteurized. And that's the whole value add for raw milk producers. That's what they're trying to do. They want to make sure everybody knows that it's raw milk. They don't want to be grade A milk. They don't want to be pasteurized milk. That's the whole point. So to add language that was suggested may cause foodborne illness does not make sense. It's not appropriate. And quite frankly, nothing has changed from 2019 to today to suggest that's required. There has been no indication, there's been no testimony, nothing that I've heard that anybody's confused by raw milk on a bottle. So why are we changing the language? And especially why are we changing the language when the department doesn't think it needs to be changed? And so for all of these reasons, I think it would be I think it would be inappropriate to amend the language from SB 346 as it's already been amended. The facts and circumstances haven't changed such to compel speech. And that's really what's happening today. Nothing has changed requiring, in such a way to require a person to change their labeling. It's been that way for a long time, and people understand what raw or unpasteurized means. Thank you.
Right. Questions? Mr. McRoberts will have some questions. First up, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So since 2019, there's essentially been no law regarding this. Is that the way it is? In other words, people have been able to talk about it since then?
So 2 points. One, the law hasn't changed in the sense that people still need to label their bottles.
Right, but I'm talking about it being able, in other words, this couple you mentioned, they can now go out and say, hey, we've got goat milk at our farm. Would you like to come try it?
Yep, and they built a beautiful website.
Right, right.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm getting at, I guess. So what kind of problems have, you sort of alluded to it right at the end, what kind of problems have we had as a result of this change in the law from since 2019?
So I talk to raw milk producers, frequently, because they know that I'm the one who represented Mark and Coraline. And I don't believe there have been any changes. There has been nothing negative as a result of free speech.
Thank you, that's what I was asking.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none, thank you. We will also, anyone else here to speak as a proponent? I don't believe we have anybody online, so we have one written proponent, George Elder, Sedgwick County farmer. You'll find that in your information. Seeing no other proponents, we will go to opponents. And what we have is Aaron Popalka, the Kansas Livestock Association. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, pleasure to be back again. I'm with the Kansas Livestock Association, and we appear as an opponent, but it's simply to, there's similar to what Mr. Bruno said about some of the language that was changed. Our focus is primarily on that. Some things I do want to address. And so let me be clear. The way the bill originally came out, which was requested by the department, I want to make sure everybody understands the department requested that bill with the support of other ag groups. It said this product contains raw milk that is not pasteurized and could contain bacteria that may cause foodborne illness. Now that last piece was drafted specifically to base it off of federal guidelines for raw meat, okay? So, and these have been, if you go to the grocery store, pick up a package of hamburger, it all has it on there. So those type of labels have not been shown to burden commerce. It's very easy to print them. They're on all raw meat packages. So let me back up a little bit and talk about, and again, if we're to make these amendments, you get us from an opponent to a proponent. And the reason for this, so KLA has a dairy council. Our producers tend to be in the western part of the state and produce not quite about half the milk in the state. And their concern is that pasteurized milk is safe, and I have in the testimony what pasteurization means and the diseases that it protects people from. They all pasteurize their milk, and they want to make sure that milk is safe and is wholesome. And whenever there's a food outbreak, it reflects poorly on the industry. And they want to make sure that, one, consumers know what they're buying, and then two, if there is an incidence, that it can clearly be related back to the raw milk production. And I think one of the things, the questions I think earlier were about, well, what's changed? And I think Mr. McRoberts touched on it. He said they have a beautiful website. So before, and let me back up, we do agree that this case is rightly decided. We shouldn't have banned advertisement, right? First Amendment should allow that. But before, they couldn't advertise. So if you were going there, you had to know about it and you knew exactly what you were getting and why. Now, we've got a website. We can do radio ads. We could do newspaper ads, TV ads, and reach new audiences far removed from the production system and without the knowledge of that some of these foodborne pathogens pose. So that's the reason why our producers feel like it's important that everyone understand clearly what the product is, that it's not been pasteurized, and that there is a risk. And I think one of the things I do want to touch on, because it came up when we testified in the Senate, it was, well, what exactly is the risk? And so we did some research, and I added this to our testimony. So CDC indicates that risks of outbreaks of foodborne illness are 150 times greater with raw milk than pasteurized milk. In a 2009 study that tested raw milk samples found that nearly a third of them contained at least one type of foodborne pathogen. So yeah, for many instances, many times nothing may happen, but statistically the risk is there that something could happen. And I've added in our testimony national instances, but specific Kansas instances from 2011, 2007 that affected a great number of people. And in particular, this hits elderly and children more than others. So, and I'll leave you with one last thing. Our policy is developed, every year at convention. We have committees. We have a dairy council that looks at this and was approved by membership. One of the things they do feel also is they would like to have everyone meet grade A standards. That's one of our policies. I know that's probably not a possibility on this bill, but I bring it up because I think you heard that, oh, wow, we can't have this long label because it's such a burden. Well, they're not regulated. If they're selling on-farm raw milk, there are no regulations. My guys have to meet grade A standards, have to be pasteurized to sell in the wholesale retail. They don't. All we're asking here is a label that can be, you could go down to Stables, get your little sticky labels, print them out. It's not a burden. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions? Mr. Popelka? All right. We'll go first to Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't you think that the type of people who are going to these farms to buy milk are people who know exactly what they're buying and already understand what the risks are to raw milk?
I would say before, when we had the ban on advertising, I'd agree with you 100%. But now that they're able to fully advertise, which I think is right, you now have websites, you now have advertisements reaching people. And this is the other thing. We don't have anybody here, but we had two people on the Senate testify, and they had very unscientific claims that this would cure kill dairy intolerance, that it would cure foodborne allergies. And I think it's when they couple the ads with those sort of statements that, yes, this disclaimer is needed in some of these instances.
Representative Murphy?
Yeah, I guess I wonder how many people really pay attention to stuff like this. Cigarettes aren't allowed to be advertised, right? They've got a warning label on the side of them. People smoke all the time, they never read that. I'm just throwing that out there. Like I said, I don't know that just throwing a warning label on there is really going to matter.
I'd say that, I'm not exactly young, but I'm not a spring chicken either. And I think smoking has significantly decreased over my lifetime, and I probably attribute it in part to some of those warning labels.
I'd say probably more to education.
Okay. Oh, Representative, who? Representative Carlin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of just comments, Aaron. Times have changed. We hear that all the time, but times have changed. And I remember in 1952, when my twin brother and sister were born, we had to start pasteurizing our milk. Doctor's orders. Little babies, tiny, pasteurize your milk. Before that, we all drank the milk. But then we began to pasteurize. I felt, even as a young child, very happy that we were doing that. So I support this part of your request. I think also, in answer to some of the other comments, we are in a time right now where young people especially, millennials maybe, but they're really into reading labels and they're really into local foods. And it's a kind of a new thing in that I didn't pay any attention when I was growing up. And so my generation didn't. The younger generation does. And I think for that reason, they are going to read those labels and they are going to study it. The other thing, though, is we get food fads. I think there's food fads all the time. Everybody wants to buy their eggs from a farm. Everybody wants to, and then they kind of wane away from those fads. But in the meantime, some damage can be done if they are getting products that might be harmful to their health. So I support these kinds of amendments. But now let me understand, the Senate took it out?
Yeah, so if you look at the bill, I got
And
the
I have
copy
a
here.
brief,
Yeah.
but I don't have a bill in front of me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'll just talk through it. On page 2 of the bill, I read the label as it appeared, and they struck everything out. So now you just basically have to put raw milk or unpasteurized. And in my written testimony, I kind of explained that if you do one or the other, depending on the product and how it's staged, could lead to some confusion about what exactly it means.
Well, I just wanted to make that comment because I just hadn't read in the bill, and I wanted to be sure I understood your position on that. And I really don't see any harm. I can't imagine the expense being too great. Does anyone, maybe who's testifying, have dollars? What's this do to our economy? How much are we talking about here? How much the impact of this business? Do we know how much raw milk is being sold or wants to be sold?
Well, I'll just ask, from our perspective, maybe the department has some numbers, but the problem is we really don't know because, as I mentioned at the close of my testimony, they're not regulated. They don't have to get permits, whereas my members who sell in the wholesale retail are permitted. We know exactly how much dairy they produce, and I don't know it off the top of my head. I could probably get you an answer, but we just don't know the universe here on raw milk. But
Just come to the microphone if you're going to answer,
As
please.
you come, yeah.
Tom Bruno, Kansas Dairy Association. Last year, if I remember correctly, it's $3 to $4 billion for grade A milk. That's the grade A, that's the inspected that ends up being pasteurized and processed currently. So I can't answer on the unpasteurized.
Okay. Mr. Roberts?
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the cost, there is a real component of human work that has to go into building some sort of label for raw milk. And here's what I mean by that. So if you're a grade A dairy and you're producing what Mr. Bruno said, 3.8 billion or million, however much, it's easy to make a label. It's easy to change your packaging. But it's totally different. It's like apples and oranges for raw milk producers. Because my experience is, after talking to a lot of raw milk producers, here's what happens. Somebody across the farm brings over a bottle from their house. They come over to like Mark and Coraline's, and Mark and Coraline will give them raw milk, and they will hand write on a bottle with like a Sharpie, raw, or they could write unpasteurized. And so what happens is these bottles are getting reused, and they're clean, but they're getting reused from time after time after time. And so what I have been told is that if you have to introduce some sort of labeling that requires an actual, affixing of a label, it really makes it difficult for people like Mark and Coraline and the people who are bringing bottles over. because then they can't put the bottles in the washing machine, or the dishwasher, excuse me. And it makes things so much more difficult for people like Mark and Coraline, where the margins are already super thin. Because what they're doing is they're basically hand milking or whatever and selling this with very little profit. And now you're forcing them to purchase a labeling machine or purchase something else. It makes sense for a big grade A dairy because they've got the money to do it, but not if you're selling, just grade A, or excuse me, raw milk from the farm.
May I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts. How are they sterilizing the bottles?
Well, that's a great question. So there's two different ways to do it. Like Mark and Coraline will have sterilized bottles, or the people who are coming over with their bottles are already sterilized. And there are obviously different ways to sterilize. You can do it with boiling water. I used to brew beer. I know there are certain things you can pour into your bottle to make sure that they're sterilized. You can do soap and water. There are ways to do it. But that doesn't change the fact that, the person who's coming over knows that they're purchasing raw milk.
Yeah, I understand, but sterilization is a part of the process, and it must be done. And I'm a canner. I grew up with dairy. My dad had a grade C dairy at the time. It was, I don't know what it is now. But yeah, you sterilize the bottles. And so the labels will come off if they're properly sterilized, and I'm not worried about that. The old label will come off. They can stick a new one on. You can use a box of labels that you mail packages with and have them printed. So I don't understand why we're so worried about labeling when we want, if we're going to market something, we want people to want it and trust it. And I think this would only help. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see this as an advantage to the person selling in that it builds trust. But thank you. If you want to comment, fine. If not, that's my comment. Thank you.
I think the people who are buying raw milk already have the trust in their producers. They have the trust. That's why they're going to the farm to look at it. And I don't perceive it as a benefit to people like Mark and Coraline who now have to add something onto a label that's, I think Mr. Bruno said, may cause foodborne illness. I don't think that that is a benefit to Mark and Coraline to include that on a label.
Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right now, as anything stands, the people, if they want to put may cause foodborne illnesses, they have every right to put that on their bottles, right?
Yes, that's
They have
correct.
individual choice, individual liberty to market their product the way they want, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
Am I still up?
If you-
Okay. I wasn't sure what happened there.
Sure. That's, well, I kind of go as we go. So any other questions for Mr. Papalka then? Appreciate your flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other opponents? Not seeing any. We have none written. And is anyone here to speak neutral on the bill? I see no one down, and I see no one standing. So with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 364. We will now open up the hearing on House Bill 2723, relating to transporting animals into the state. And some more information. This bill was one that was introduced just a couple of days ago. I introduced it in the Appropriations Committee, and it was passed out of the Senate Ag Committee, but some sort of miscommunication. It did not get above the line for them to pass before turnaround. So this is the process of what we're doing. So the original language of the bill comes from the Senate. So Kyle, if you would like to explain. Just wanted to give you a little background on kind of where this came from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a good summary of kind of where this language originated from. So this House bill is a mirror of the version of the Senate bill as it was amended by the Senate Ag Committee. Under current law, it is unlawful for any person to bring, drive, or transport any animal that may be used in the preparation of meat or meat products into the state without getting the animal inspected by a licensed veterinarian and being issued a certificate of veterinary inspection. Currently, KSA 4760C states that any person who violates the importation of livestock laws shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by a fine between $100 and $1,000 or imprisonment between 30 days and 1 year. House Bill 2731, as it is currently written, would change the penalty for such a violation to a Class C non-person misdemeanor, which carries a maximum sentence of 1 month's jail time and a $500 fine. So the bill's reducing the ceiling of those punishments. Where it would have been possibly up to $1,000, now it could only go up to $500. Jail time could only be up to a month instead of a year. Additionally, under subsection B, the bill would allow a civil penalty between $100 and $1,000 for each shipment into the state that is in violation of the law. Under subsection C, any penalty imposed would be upon written order of the Animal Health Commissioner, and any such penalty could be appealed within 20 days of such notification. Under subsection D, money collected from civil penalties would be deposited in the state general fund. Under subsection E, the Animal Health Commissioner could require people to submit records relating to the suspected unlawful transportation of animals, the special permit requirements of KSA 47607A, or the relevant rules and regulations. Failure to cooperate with any such request for the records would be considered a violation of the Act. House Bill 2723 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. With that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Questions for Kyle? Seeing none, thank you. We will now open up, there is a fiscal note, but no measure of effect, it says. And so we'll open up our proponents. First up, Dr. Andy Hawkins, Assistant Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Dr. Hawkins, thank you and welcome to committee.
All right. So, hey, good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the committee. My name is Andy Hawkins. I currently serve as Assistant Animal Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Ag. Today, I'm here in support of House Bill 2723, which addresses laws pertaining to the importation of livestock. So currently, the current statute, 47-607, makes it unlawful to enter or import livestock into the state of Kansas without a certificate of veterinary inspection. As it currently stands, somebody in violation of that would be guilty of undisclosed misdemeanor or unclassified misdemeanor, and that would only be enforceable at the local jurisdiction. So we'd have to engage the local county prosecutor to take up the case. So what is a certificate of veterinary inspection? So a CVI, also known as a health certificate, basically is a document that in this case would be initiated in the origination state, and it's signed by a licensed and Category 2 accredited veterinarian, and it basically signifies that the livestock on that shipment are free of contagious and communicable disease, and they have been inspected by that veterinarian. That needs to occur within 30 days prior to import into our state. In addition to that, it also provides valuable information for us in the event that there is an animal health emergency or a disease incident that's associated with that shipment, so we can be able to trace back or trace forward if need be. It also provides an opportunity for the producer and the veterinarian to have a discussion to make sure that the destination state import requirements are being met. So every state in the United States has the ability to set their own import requirements, so the destination import requirements. Keeping in mind that those can be tailored, though, and specific to each state. However, they are, for the most part, universal. And those can change depending on disease risk or those types of things that happen in current events. So when we receive notification that a movement violation has occurred, as you guys can imagine, it takes an inordinate amount of time to deal with those. So I stand up here today, just me, but behind me is a team of people that go to work on these situations. It can take a lot of time and manpower. A lot of times we have very limited access to records, very little to go off of, and our goal is to verify the disease and status of those animals free of disease, hopefully, or at least to verify the health status of those animals. The way things work these days, livestock move very quickly. So a lot of times by the time we've received notification, the livestock are now on to destination B. So coming in to point A, now move to point B, which makes it impractical for us to issue a quarantine and lock the facility down until the import requirements have been met, because the livestock have already went to their next location. To kind of give you guys some examples of what we deal with, I'll provide two examples. These are not all inclusive, just kind of give you an idea why we're here today. So just in the past year, we've had an individual who moved bulls from a neighboring state, and in consultation with his veterinarian in that state, he was told that he had to have a CVI and that the bulls on that shipment had to have a trick statement. So Trichomonas foetus is a protozoan disease that infects cattle. It's a disease that's incurable in the bulls. Cows can actually mount an immune response and clear the disease, but not bulls. Once they're infected for life. So why does that matter? If you're a producer and you have a positive trick incident in your herd, you can have a lot of open cows. That means cows did not get pregnant. I've seen incidents where producers have had up to 80% open cows. So it's something we take very serious. We have a very low incidence and prevalence of trick in our state, and we'd like to keep it that way. So with that, the individual went ahead and proceeded into the state anyways. So that's one instance. Another classic example we see is people moving horses into the state of Kansas without a CVI and without having a Hawkins test. And the Hawkins test is a document that verifies that that horse has been tested for equine infectious anemia. Equine infectious anemia is a disease which there is no vaccine, no treatment for the most part, and there's no cure. So horses that get infected with EIA or equine infectious anemia ultimately end up usually being euthanized because lifelong quarantine is almost impossible to establish in those situations. So as you guys can kind of perceive, incidents like these put our livestock population at risk. So in order to have adequate and timely enforcement, the Livestock Animal Health Commissioner is asking authority to issue civil penalties to be added to the import law at 47607C. And then I would also just say, in working with stakeholders and constituents, we've also, the language will say knowingly and intentionally. So that is the goal here is to curb the people who are repeat offenders, if you will. So it's those who have knowingly and intentionally violated our import laws. I would also say that the penalty is not less than 100, but not more than 1,000 per shipment. Okay, so the reason that we went with per shipment, because if it was per violation and you figure that a semi-load of cattle, we can have 40 plus head on there, that's not being practical because you'd be looking at like a $40,000 fine. So again, it's focused at per shipment. In addition to that, there's the clause in there allowing the Animal Health Commissioner to request records, and it's all about verifying the health status of those animals. So if we have an import violation, we need to be able to verify the status. As has been previously mentioned, the bill was previously heard in the Ag Senate as 345, but it failed to make it on general orders. So we're just asking for reintroduction of this bill in an exempt form. So that's where we're at today. KDA believes that this bill will allow the Animal Health Commissioner to fulfill his duties in a responsible manner to protect our livestock from introduction of disease and ultimately spread. So with that, I thank everybody for their time, and I'll do my best to answer questions if you have some.
All right, very good. Good explanation. Lots, I mean, it's kind of heady stuff if you're kind of aware. Maybe everybody learned something today, I don't know. Questions for Dr. Hawkins? You did do a good job. Oh, Representative Carlin, we almost got you out of here.
I can always think of something. On the equine infectious anemia disease, is that a disease that is only specific to horses?
Correct.
So are there any other animals that could be defined as an equine and could carry this? Any other in the world?
So any equidae. So donkeys, for instance, can carry. So absolutely, mules, donkeys, any equidae.
I guess I'd like you to tell me what equine actually.
Species, coming from the species equine. So equidae, it's the genus and order of how they're classified. So equine in general.
Does it have to do with their hoof? And I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what other animals could, because I have some specific reasons for asking. I just want to ask it that way.
It's equine infectious anemia. It's species specific.
Okay.
We are curious about your examples. What are you getting at?
No, there are other animals in the state, camels and other
Camels
animals.
would not get this
And
disease.
that's what, and I have had a person ask me about status of whether camels are livestock. I mentioned that to you. And I thought, well, I don't know what if we need to clarify.
You've got the Assistant Health Commissioner right in front of you.
I know.
There is a definition of livestock, and I don't have it right here in front of me, but there is a definition in the statute, and it spells out exactly what's classified as livestock.
And I think I pointed them in that direction.
Yep.
Because I did check on that. But I just wondered because I didn't read it, I sent them to read it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Maybe Revisor Hamilton can find that and send that to everybody so we know what the definition of livestock is in Kansas.
Here it is.
Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we have this expert in front of us, I think we ought to pick on Dr. Andy here, and maybe he can explain to the representative from Manhattan some of the different diseases that, like trichomoniasis and vesicular stomatitis, and these veterinarians are trained to look for things that we do not want in our domestic herd here in Kansas, and they've done an excellent job of keeping those things out and trying to protect us. Occasionally brucellosis will crop up somewhere, or VS, or some of those types of things, and Kansas has done an excellent job in the past of doing that, but I'm sure he could lay some names on some of us that would confuse us entirely.
Yeah, we can have a little fun with that, but a large part of our job is to protect the state against the incursion or introduction of a foreign animal disease, and that's something that we take very, very seriously. So in our state, we have 7 field veterinarians throughout the state that are strategically placed. 4 of those are USDA and 3 are KDA, but we all work very closely together. So one of the examples brought up was vesicular stomatitis in the summer of 2020. The state of Kansas had over 270 investigations and 100 confirmed positive premises. And up until the first case came in June of 2020. In late October 2019, we had 1 case of VS in the very northwestern part in Sherman County. But up until that point, the state of Kansas had not seen any. And that's a disease that we're very concerned about because it mimics foot and mouth disease. And it can spread throughout the livestock population. So that's just an example. I could probably go on all day, but just to kind of give you guys an idea what we do and why we do it, because our job's to ensure our domestic and international trading partners that our livestock population is healthy and safe.
Very good. Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a, I don't know, a question, but here a while back, we were invited to go to K-State and go through part of their veterinary program, and, you know, it was a drill, it wasn't a real thing, but watch how they track, and with your different areas that you were speaking about. I mean, it was amazing to me, because that's exactly what they did, is they were tracking and trying to keep track if it would happen to come into Kansas. And that was, so is that similar to what?
Very true, and I believe I saw you were at the operations team. So so correct. So you were part of our annual exercise within the College Department of Agriculture. We do that every December, where we stand up our incident management team. You were that day in the operations team. That's where I spend most of my time. So yes, that is something we take very serious. We have about over 100 people that serve on our incident management team. Kansas is seen as a leader in the nation. It's something we're very proud of, and it's something that we definitely take very serious.
Thank you, and that was a very impressive day, and to watch, and to be allowed to go from table to table and interact with those people while they were working, even though it was not a real situation. Still, the way they worked together and things was quite impressive, and I would urge everybody to take advantage of that if they have the chance. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
All right. I think that's it, Dr. Hoff.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Since the late hour, I was going to ask you what's a headway, but then we'd go somewhere else. I was trying, at least I speak into the mic, Representative Jacobs, so they can hear me. That was not utterly bad, was it? That's what he said. Y'all missed it. So, okay, let's get back to it. Up next, John Donnelly from the Kansas Farm Bureau. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I can keep this even more brief than I have in the past. We are extremely supportive of the language in House Bill 2723, and once again, the technical amendments referenced are in the language, so you can ignore that part of the testimony. But the monitoring and tracking of animal disease in the state of Kansas, the nation, and the world is of the utmost importance, and the Division of Animal Health does a great job. You know, the animal disease exercises that they have, foreign animal disease exercises, are second to none and have been for years. Kansas is a model for the nation and the world, and we are supportive of the changes made here, and we appreciate them working with us to tweak the language to ensure that we didn't have, you know, potential $40,000 to $50,000 fines for a truckload of cattle that might have had a paperwork mistake. So we are supportive of the bill, and we'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Questions for Mr. Donnelly? Representative Jacobs?
If I may, real quick, say, of course, Fort Scott, and maybe you go to Joplin or Butler to buy. In order to bring them back to the fort, do I need to bring them through some testing or get some certification for me just doing that?
It would be my understanding that they would have a certificate of veterinary inspection that would go on the load. And the question we had is, I've heard of instances where maybe the trucks left before the paperwork got put into the truck, and we were worried about that being a potential $40,000 fine for a simple mistake like that. But any cattle that go through the sale barn there's a veterinarian that's on site that would provide that paperwork. That would be my understanding, and I'm sure Dr. Hawkins will correct me if I'm wrong.
Representative Jacobs?
If I may, so say privately, I go to a private individual's farm, Missouri, wherever, and buy a handful, and do I need certification then? Just
Yes.
private?
Yes, you would need that. In fact, I'll give an example. I was on the phone with my dad today, and we're shipping loads of cattle to Nebraska tomorrow, and we were making sure that we had all of that in line, that we were going to get the certificate of veterinary inspection. So yes, you do have to.
Okay, thank you.
Should we go longer for true confessions, or?
With that.
No, but you are correct with bull sales or other things. So you have more questions, Representative Jacobs?
Actually, I do. How many other states around us are doing the exact same thing we're doing? I mean, is it Missouri and Nebraska, Colorado and Oklahoma? And
It would be my understanding, I'm going to look back here, but every state in the United States has a similar type program.
Okay. More questions, Mr. Donnelly? Seeing none, thank you. Dean Clare from Kansas Livestock Association. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be brief. KLA strongly supports, I'm Dean Clare, serve with the Kansas Livestock Association. KLA strongly supports KDA's animal health departments in its efforts to protect our domestic livestock population, including those provisions here in House Bill 2723. Currently, all animals entering the state, yes, Representative Carlin, even camels have to have certain certificates of veterinary inspections or CVIs specific to cattle producers. Those are intended to protect our livestock herds from 3 distinct diseases that are of high risk: trichomoniasis, brucellosis, and bovine tuberculosis. And those testing requirements would differ depending on the use of that intended animal. For example, a bull who's over 18 months of age would be required to have a negative trick test, whereas a bull that's headed to slaughter would not. And so there's some differentiations in there, but nonetheless, stand here in support of House Bill 2723 and protecting our livestock herds. And I'd stand for questions when necessary.
Question, Mr. Clare? Nobody? Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
We may have some at the end here. I don't know. No, any other proponents? Not seeing any. I have no opponents or neutral. Anyone else here wanting to testify on the bill? Seeing none, we will close the hearing now on House Bill 2723. A reminder, tomorrow, committee, we will hear from Dr. Ernie Minton, the Dean of the College of Agriculture, K-State. Also, a House Bill 2530, the meat analog bill. We'll do a quick work on that again. Hopefully a compromise has been reached, which we believe, and then that will work its way back to the Committee of the Whole. So, and at this time, we're not scheduled to meet on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, we are scheduled to have an informational briefing on indoor farming. Next week, we're currently scheduled to meet on Tuesday and Wednesday. That is of now, but watch your emails and the bulletin board. So anything else for the good of the cause? Seeing not, we are adjourned.